Hello, everybody. This is Catholic Dad. Episode number 130. The problem with traditional Catholics. So let me tell you my story. I go to Novus Ordo Mass. I go to the new Mass, I grew up in the new Mass. I grew up essentially like all cradle Catholics do, and I didn't really understand my faith. And so one day, I had a traditional Catholic invite me to a traditional Latin Mass, the Tridentine Rite. And I went there with my wife and one child at the time. Well, maybe it was two children at the time, but we went there and we were completely confused by the faith. And so what I did was I took the onus on myself to try to figure out what the traditional Latin Mass was about. And so I started reading about the Mass, and I started reading about the liturgy. And really that's how I found my Catholic faith, and I must thank the traditional movement for that. It really is. It's been a great gift to me. It's really created order in my life. It's created a wonderful household for my wife and my children, and it's also given me 9 children, which I don't know if you know the magnitude of that, but having 9 kids, 9 immortal souls for God, 9 warriors for God, I think that's really an important thing. But nonetheless, I moved away from the Latin Mass, and I moved to this rural town where I'm a physician. And we were traveling to the Latin Mass for a while, but it was too far, it was too hard, and it was too difficult. And so we eventually settled into our little church community here in this small town America. It's Novus Ordo. It's the new Mass, and it's really a wonderful parish. I think it's going in the correct direction, bar none. I think everybody is building the church in good ways. I don't see us going in the wrong way at all. But I can tell you some of my experiences with the traditional Latin Mass, with the traditional community. I just gave an episode on the virtue of hope. And I'll tell you, the traditional Latin Mass communities tend to lack hope. They are very weak in that virtue. Remember, the 7 virtues are peanut butter and jelly, French toast, and faith, hope, and love. So peanut butter and jelly, prudence, justice; French toast is fortitude and temperance; and then faith, hope, and love. You have to have all 7 virtues, and they need to be buoyed to one another to help each other out. And if you lack any of the virtues, it can actually become a major problem, and will lead you to leading a disordered life. But the hope virtue, the virtue that I've stated, is the most attractive of all virtues. If you have hope, then you attract people to you. If you have the hope virtue and you call yourself a Christian, you have the capacity to evangelize people like nobody else. Because if you're hopeful, it means that you believe the Lord Jesus Christ is in charge, and that you don't have to remake the world in your own image, right? I believe if you have the hope virtue, you believe in grace, it's actually the counter virtue to pride in some ways. Because if you're prideful, you want to make the world in your own image. You want to actually create the perfect liturgy. You want to create the perfect church. That leads to schism. It leads to Gnosticism. It leads to all sorts of horrible fragmentation of Christianity. If you have the virtue of hope, you have the capacity to attract people to you because you are hopeful. Why would you be hopeful if you're a Christian? What's the reason to be hopeful? And the reason to be hopeful is God is in charge, right? And we know that, we acknowledge that, and we live by His graces. And it's only through His graces that we can have eternal salvation. If you have that, then nothing's ever going to get you down. It doesn't matter how many trials and tribulations and tragedies that the world throws at you. If you have hope, you will put your shoulders back and you will persevere. And if you persevere, you will draw people to you because they'll realize you have strength. And if you have strength, then you have courage. And you have courage, then you have hope. And it's a never-ending cycle. And so the traditional movements that I was a part of, they gave me my faith. They really did. They taught me about the true presence of the Eucharist and living a sacramental life. And that's a great, I thank the traditional movement for that. But the one thing that they didn't give me was hope. Because whenever we got together and we talk about the faith, it was always negative. It was always how the Pope doesn't understand. Oh, the rubrics, nobody understands the rubrics. Oh, we're in this grind in this life where we are just fighting against absolutely everybody. People in the Novus Ordo Mass, the new Mass, just non-traditional Roman Catholics, the Protestants, you name it. Like, we're enemies of everybody, and that is a problem if you're like that, because you cannot evangelize the world when you're like that. And the traditional Catholics, they tend to hole up, they tend to try to live a monastic life with their children, and that's not what you're called to do as a Catholic family. as a Catholic family, you're called to go into this world and not be of this world. You're called to go into this world and be separate from this world, but be a beacon of light for the hope, or for the future, for the hope of the future. And so, the problem with the traditional movement is, and it's not that they don't get the rubrics wrong, they don't get the liturgy wrong, they get a lot right, but they lack hope, and they lack hope in a major way. That's one of the great theological virtues, and I hope the traditional movements realize this, because if they develop hope, then they have the capacity to evangelize the world. But if they don't have hope, then they're just going to fade away into nothingness, and they're going to be the grumpy old men on the couch that nobody listens to. And so this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe and share with your friends. Yeah, pray the daily rosary, live a sacramental life, and get the Mass. God bless.